Turning to the primary that is probably the one most people are watching, certainly drawing a lot of money. It's the House primary in Kentucky, and it's a test of this Epstein revolt that has upended Donald Trump's second term. The incumbent Republican worked with Democrats, Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican, and has become basically the Liz Cheney of the GOP and Trump-Epstein crisis, in the same way that Cheney stood up to Trump on the insurrection and democracy issues. In the second term, we have seen Massie stand up repeatedly and boldly to Donald Trump's Epstein secrecy. And the parallel also matters because Massie, like Cheney, has long been a staunch conservative, the type of person who before Trump was seen as, if anything, a kind of loud, proud conservative Republican, not someone that they'd call a rhino or moderate on some issues. And yet on this principal issue of Epstein, well, Massie drew the line.
The perpetrators are being protected because they're rich and powerful and political donors to the establishment here in Washington, D.C. I prefer, actually, it goes straight to the president. I believe he's trying to protect friends and donors. I think we need to give the DOJ a chance to go back through and correct their mistakes.
How long do they have to do that? How long do they have to redact these files?
They're already breaking the law.
This is bigger than Watergate. This cover-up spans decades, and you are responsible for this portion of it.
Men need to be perp walked in handcuffs to the jail. At some point, somebody got to Pam Bondi and said, it's your job to cover this up.
This wasn't just one vote or one speech. As you can see, Massie was a leader. And because the House was narrow in the majority, Massie, with a couple other Republicans like MTG, broke Trump. And once the dam broke, it turned out there weren't a lot of Republicans left standing by him. And so they had a veto-proof majority to release the Epstein files, which thoroughly exposed many people, including some people in Trump's cabinet, their lies about Epstein Island, the stories we've been covering. A lot of that draws back to Massie. And so after bringing the files to light, well, Trump, who had claimed at one point he was fine with all this, clearly wasn't, acting hurt, angry, and like he still had more to hide. He would go after Massie and show his interest in getting involved in the details of politics. Trump was handpicking a person to run against him, where they've raised a lot of money, all of this to send a message to anyone who apparently would stand with the survivors, something Trump claimed to do before breaking that vow for files release. This House primary race, as I mentioned, is now the most expensive in history, over $30 million, a lot of that through those big mysterious PAC monies, and it's PAC money funds, and it's against Massie in the main. So this is how our politics works today. Someone does something like this, other Republicans are forced to pretend they agree with Massie, but then the system drops tens of millions of dollars on a House primary. It's not even a general election yet. As Velshi mentioned, the polling is tight, and Trump and his allies, in doing this much organizing and fundraising and intervention, suggests that they still have Epstein living in their mind, that they still are angry about it, worried about it, want to send a message, don't stand up to Trump on Epstein. So desperate to bury the story, it is, of course, back in the news tonight, and we will see, of course, what the results are. But the fact that a congressman you probably hadn't heard much about a few years ago, who is one of over 400 people, is now on par with the president, just shows how big this story and this embarrassment has been for Donald Trump. And remember, he was forced to sign the Epstein into law because of the public pressure and sometimes bipartisan pressure from the Massie-Kano wing.
The White House is privately trying to tamp down any support for transparency around the Epstein files, even though that is what an overwhelming majority of Americans, including MAGA voters, want.
President Trump is doing just about everything in his power to quash a story that just will not go away.
President Trump says he has signed the bill to release the Epstein files.
No surprise that the president didn't sign this bill publicly because the president wants to turn attention away from this whole Epstein files saga.
It was a double loss for Trump, an issue that exposed his history, his alleged malfeasance, his handling of the DOJ, his ties to Epstein, even if he was not accused of any criminal wrongdoing in that case. But all of that he wanted to hide, and instead it was out front and center. And then second, it revealed that the narrative we sometimes hear that the Republicans in Congress will do anything for him was wrong. Massey led the effort that led to the supermajority that meant Trump couldn't stop them. And that's a massive rift in the GOP. Today's primary both reflects Massey's strength, how big he got, how important this is, but also the Trump school of politics that tries to make sure, even if there is a Cheney or a Massey out there, people who are actually willing to stand up and risk parts of their career to do what they think is the right thing, that there will be hell to pay in Trump's MAGA version of the GOP. This is someone who, more than most members of Congress, actually upended part of Trump's first term. Not many people think we would have had Epstein Files Act passed without him. And now we're seeing more money in this primary than any other in history. It speaks to both his impact, but also why his job's on the line tonight. What does this race say to you?
Yeah, I think that even if Thomas Massey falls short tonight, the reality is my expectation is that he will have really overperformed the other Trump Republican challengers to Donald Trump. Just last week, you saw Bill Cassidy only get 25% of the vote in a Republican primary in Louisiana. Now, Cassidy's strategy after he voted to impeach Trump 6 years ago was then to suck up to Trump. I mean, he actually voted for RFK Jr. of all things. Massey has taken an opposite tact. He is actually arguing against Trump based on conservative first principles. He's arguing against him on spending. He's arguing against him on the Iran war. And most importantly, he is arguing against him on Epstein. And I think if Massey goes down tonight, it will show that the Republican Party is truly a cult of personality. It is much more about what Donald Trump says and wants you to do than it is about any sort of conservative principles.
The wider context is how many Republicans are actually moving away from Trump, even though the way our primaries work means that it can be really distorted. But if we widen out, I want to show the retirements. You've got over 35 House Republicans just choosing to retire rather than run in what they expect to be tough midterms, 7 in the Senate. So you have people like MTG who made their points and left, and then you have Massey tonight trying to survive while being a kind of independent voice. And I wonder why, Che, you think that's sort of undercounted in our politics. I mentioned the narrative is, no one will stand up to Trump. In fact, he's very unpopular. They've stood up to him on Epstein and the war. The MAGA pundits online and digital are pretty loud lately. And it's not nothing to have 37 people say, I'd rather quit than run with you. And another handful like Massey say, I'm not really with you, but we'll see if I can keep my seat.
Yeah, I mean, we don't generally track retirements and make them big stories because they don't really drive news cycles. They're very quiet events. You know, what Tom Massey did was a very loud event. What Marjorie Taylor Greene did was a very loud event where she actually openly opposed Trump. What has happened here with these Republicans is they don't want to actively oppose Trump. They don't want to pay the consequences of that. I do remember that Mitt Romney said that several Republicans told him the reason they didn't vote for Trump's impeachment after January 6th was that they were concerned about the security of themselves and their families. I think that that's actually a big part of the thinking here, that if we say something publicly and loudly against Trump, we really put ourselves in his crosshairs. We put ourselves at risk of the wrath of MAGA and the MAGA mob, a mob that, by the way, might be more empowered as a result of the slush fund that you talked about at the top of the show that's been created. It's much easier for them to simply say, I retire, I'm going away, I'm going to try to make money some other way, I'm going to try to live my life in some other way. It's much easier to do that.
No, you're being direct, and these are difficult conversations, but you can compare it to if you're playing, street basketball and there's a little rough and tumble foul, but everyone leaves the court and goes home. That's one type of game. But if you have reason to believe that someone else is going to come beat you up or your family or shoot you after the game, it changes how you play on that court. And American politics is supposed to be governed by the rule of law, peaceful transfer of power. Trump's the first person to break that. Tonight he's trying to fund violent criminals in a spirit of political violence. This is the world we're in. And you know me, I take great pains to be fair and nonpartisan, but that's the actual place we're at. And so you're reminding us why some of those retirements happened. I'm curious what you think about the other way it can backfire, which is there are candidates like Massey or Cornyn who might do better as an independent-minded conservative in the general than the Trump stooges that are sometimes being run as their replacements.
You would think so. I think the problem is that the evidence I'm seeing is a lot of the GOP grassroots seem to be all in on Trump. And they seem to be doing this even though, you know, the reason that he's going against Massey is entirely because of Epstein. I mean, Trump is literally covering up perhaps his own behavior, certainly the behavior of others, you know, and their connection with this very, shall we say, shady character, Jeffrey Epstein. You know, so the fact that Republicans are not outraged enough about that to sort of say, hey, we're with Tom Massey overwhelmingly and not with this other guy that Trump has put up as a stooge for him, that speaks volumes really about them and about who they are. And it really also says to Democrats, you know, going forward, this is going to be a very complex and difficult picture. You know, even if Democrats win the Congress, and I believe that they will this fall, even if they do, governing is going to be very difficult when you have a situation where Donald Trump enjoys 75, 80% approval among Republicans. That means that things that you do to try to curb his corruption, his other behaviors, is simply not going to be met with any kind of cooperation on the other side of the aisle.